Mr. Seshadri Chari. Seshadri, welcome to Public Forum. Right next to him, Professor Ashwini Kanta Ray, political analyst, social analyst, formerly with the Jawaharlal Nehru University in New Delhi. Professor Ray, welcome to Public Forum.
Thank you.
Right next to him, Vinay Rai, editor, Akbari, and these days in the headlines because of his writ petition against 21 social networking websites, the judgment of which is pending in the courts. Vinay Rai, welcome to Public Forum. Right here with me, Shivang Vij, journalist, blogger, web journalist, spends almost 25 hours per day on the internet. Shivang, thank you so much for joining us here on Public Forum. Seshadri ji, I would like to begin with you. As I tried to present in my introduction, the issue of freedom of speech, it seems to be cutting across various controversies that we are seeing right now in India. Be it about Salman Rushdie and his book, which remains to be controversial even 3 decades after it was banned, or be it about whatever is being said about the social responsibility of social networking sites. The debate which often comes about, the argument which people present that Article 19 of the Indian Constitution guarantees us freedom of speech and expression. There are similar articles in many other constitutions across the world. So essentially, freedom of speech and expression is something which is guaranteed by every civilized society. But is there a point where this freedom ends, or are there riders to it? As far as specifically in the Indian context, I would like to begin from you, Seshadri ji.
You mentioned about Article 19 of the Constitution, which gives a right. But we should also remember one thing: no right is absolute. Every right has a corresponding duty. These corresponding duties may not be enshrined in the Constitution verbatim. The Constitution may not say that against this right, this is your duty. But there are rights which are enumerated. But the duties are part and parcel of the performance of that right. I have got absolute freedom to walk in the streets, total freedom. But if there is a 144, my freedom is curtailed. Or I have got the freedom to move my hands in any manner whatsoever I like. It's my hand and it's my atmosphere. But if I see a face in front of me at a striking distance and I start moving my hand in such a manner that I strike the opposite person, it amounts to an assault. So my freedom has to have certain limitations. But what these limitations are, who is to impose, how these limitations are to be imposed, and at what stage these limitations are to be imposed, are all the issues that are objective and subjective.
So who decides that? Ideally, in a civilized society, who should decide that? Where does the freedom of expression end?
See, ultimately the decision making bodies have been enumerated, like the legislature, for example. The parliament decides. But it's not necessary that the parliament's decision should always be accepted and be final. For example, during emergency, most of the panelists, except of course Mr. Roy, would not have probably seen emergency from very close quarters.
Not close quarters, but my age is not as young as you think. I have not gone to
but apart from you too, because I wasn't even born.
I mean, like, I was in jail during emergency. And the newspaper which I was editing much later, of course, the organizer and the motherland were banned.
Was banned.
That is because the government of India told us that this is what you have to publish, and every day before you publish the news items and the editorial, it has to be sent to the censorship authority.
But this is about the emergency, which is
no, during emergency there was a total restriction on freedom of expression.
No, but this is about emergency, when there is suspension of normalcy. What about the normal situation?
Similarly, the point I was trying to make is, if we say that the parliament is the final arbitrator of your freedom, then again the parliament also can go wrong. So you can never say that as far as the freedom is concerned, so and so is arbitrator. Finally, it is the civil society itself that has to take the call. It is a civil society in the best interest of the conduct of the day-to-day affairs of the civil society. They have to come together, and these institutions have to be built. The media, the judiciary, the television channels, the newspapers, the NGOs, the people, they are all part and parcel of the civil society, and they have to emerge collectively to take a proper decision on these things.
Okay, so you're saying that it's civil society which collectively has to take this decision. Professor Ray, seems to be a very old issue, a centuries old issue, not just in the Indian context, because Voltaire's quotation is as old as the hills probably. I do not agree with the word you say, but I will defend to death your right to say it. In the Indian context especially, Professor Ray, how do you look at the articulation of the freedom of speech and where does it end?
You began with Voltaire, in the context of the concept of right of freedom of speech and expression. Voltaire would be considered, and his quotation would be considered almost in recent times. It is as old as the Magna Carta, 1215, 13th century. You talked of many of us not born, many of our ancestors were not born in 1215. Magna Carta begins with one of the most important principles of the Magna Carta is civil and political rights, of which the first right, which is whether it is enshrined or incorporated in any constitution or not, it is considered the beginning of human rights, in the present context, first generation of human rights. Right of freedom of speech and expression, right against arbitrary arrest, imprisonment, and right against custodial torture. These three constitutes the quintessential component of human rights, civil and political rights, and basis of all democratic evolution. Beyond that, there have been, evolution has taken place in a way that much farther, many more new rights have come, economic and social rights have come, called the second generation of rights, right to work, right to freedom, right to climate, a whole range of rights. But this is almost so important component of right that distinguished human life from all other forms of life in the planet, that whether it is incorporated in the constitution or not, this becomes an important component to distinguish any modern society, let me put it this way, from any other. In the Indian context also, when we began our constitution, there was a very interesting and a very clever distinction between these civil and political rights and economic and social rights, which are called the second generation of human rights, beginning with the socialist revolution. We made the first generation of rights, happily for us, as clearly enforceable, justiciable rights, civil and political rights, which includes Article 19. While most of the economic and social rights had been kept as desirable, but not enforceable and justiciable. They were part 4 of our constitution, not part 3 of our constitution. So it is a constitutionally accepted principle of our democratic society. In fact, one of the first principles of our democratic society is right of freedom of speech and expression. Mr. Chari spoke of the emergency. As you rightly pointed out, these are exceptions. And these exceptions also society. In fact, one of the freedom expression. When there is exception, these exceptions principle of our society. In fact, one of the principles of democratic society of freedom expression. Chari spoke of the emergency. You rightly pointed out these exceptions. These exceptions our society. In fact, one of the principles of democratic freedom expression. Chari spoke of the emergency. Exception. My close exception. These exceptions only principle of our close society. In fact, one of the principles of democratic society of freedom expression. Chari spoke the emergency. You rightly pointed the exception. These exceptions only principle of our society. In fact, one of the principles of democratic society of freedom expression. Chari spoke to rightly exception. These exceptions only principle of our democratic society. In fact, one of the principles of democratic society is freedom of expression. Tari spoke the emergency. You rightly point out these exceptions. These exceptions only our society. In fact, one of the principles of democratic society is freedom.
Vinay Rai, I would like to come to you now. Your petition is against 21 social networking sites, basically against objectionable content which is available on these websites, and as the courts have also asked them, which is basically the basis of your petition was they were asked to remove it, and now it is coming out that since they have said that they cannot remove that objectionable content, this interesting story came out that the courts were forced to threaten that, like China, we would ban you website. So essentially your petition has brought us to a situation when we are looking at the possibility of websites like Google, Facebook and many other social networking websites being banned. I would like to know, what was your motivation, what was your objective, what was your inspiration behind bringing up this case?
देखिए चारू, पहले तो मैं हिंदी में बात करूंगा आपसे। सबसे बड़ी बात है कि जिस तरीके की चीज़ें obscene जिसकी बात हम करते हैं, खासतौर से रिलीजियस सेंटिमेंट की हम बात करेंगे इस पर, जो कंटेंट हमने कोर्ट के सामने रखे थे, पटियाला हाउस कोर्ट के सामने, उसमें सभी धर्मों की भावनाएं हाथ होती हैं। पॉलिटिकल जो कंटेंट है वो तो हमने दिए ही नहीं है कोर्ट के सामने अभी। और सबसे बड़ी बात है कि फ्रीडम ऑफ स्पीच होना चाहिए, तभी आज हम सब बैठ के बाद यहाँ डिबेट कर रहे हैं और ये हमारा अधिकार है, हमें मिला हुआ है। किसी भी चीज़ के बैन और सेंसरशिप के हम खिलाफ हैं, लेकिन क्या हम अपने अंदर खुद ऐसा कोई मैकेनिज्म डेवलप नहीं कर सकते हैं कि अगर कोई ऐसी चीज़ें कंटेंट आ रही है उसको हम रोक सकें, हटा सकें? हम इलेक्ट्रॉनिक मीडिया को उदाहरण देंगे। 26/11 की घटना हुई, टेलीकास्ट जिस परिस्थितियों में हुआ उसको लेकर के गवर्नमेंट ने एक चेक पॉइंट बनाया कि उसमें जो डायरेक्ट टेलीकास्ट हुआ उसके चलते कई लोग कैजुअलिटीज हुई, हमारी आर्मी को पीछे हटना पड़ा। और बाद में एक रूल बनाया गया कि आप क्या दिखाएंगे नहीं दिखाएंगे, और एक NBA फॉर्म की गई, वो डायरेक्ट करती है हम लोगों को। उसका सिंपल एग्जाम्पल देखने को मिला टाइटल सूट के दौरान, कि उसने तय किया कि जिससे तनाव फैलता हो वो आप नहीं दिखाएंगे, कोई ऐसी नारेबाजी आप नहीं दिखाएंगे, किसी का खुशी नहीं दिखाएंगे, किसी के गम को नहीं इजहार करेंगे। जब इस चीज को हम अवॉइड कर रहे हैं तो क्या फिर किसी की भावनाओं का आहत करने वाले कंटेंट को हम दिखा सकते हैं? और जहां तक हाईकोर्ट का सवाल है, जिसने माननीय हाईकोर्ट ने कहा कि हम चाइना की तरह बैन कर देंगे, वो सवाल आया ही क्यों? तो कोर्ट ने जानना चाहा कंपनियों से कि क्या आप उस पर पड़े हुए जो ऑप्शन है उसको हटाएंगे, तो हम हटा नहीं सकते। सेकेंड क्वेश्चन था क्या आप हटवा सकते हैं, तो उनका हम हटवा भी नहीं सकते। जब आप कोई ऑप्शन ही नहीं देंगे माननीय कोर्ट के सामने, तो ऑप्शन क्या है उनके पास? तो उन्होंने उस रेफरेंस में इस बात को कहा, वो भी एक मौखिक कमेंट था उनका, भी कोई ऑर्डर नहीं है। उसकी संभावनाएं तलाशी जा रही हैं, खुद सेल्फ मैकेनिज्म ऐसा कोई डेवलप कर ले कंपनियां जिसके चलते चीजें ना आने पाए और किसी की भावनाएं आहत ना हो। क्योंकि आपने देखा है कि मोहम्मद साहब की एक इमेज आती है, किस तरह से घमासान बच जाता है। हिंदू देवी देवताओं के जिस तरीके के तमाम कई बार हुए हैं, वैसे ज्यादा लिबरल मैं मानता हूं कि हिंदू ज्यादा लिबरल रहते हैं, लेकिन फिर भी फसाद खड़ा होता है, तनाव पैदा होता है। तो किसी के धर्म को आहत करके फ्रीडम ऑफ स्पीच का इजहार किया जाए, ये ज्यादा मैं वाजिब नहीं मानता।
Okay, you're saying that the content on the internet could prove damaging to the sentiments of religious sentiments, and which is why it needs to be removed. Do you have an account on Facebook?
देखिए पहले मेरा हुआ करता था फेसबुक पे अकाउंट पे, लेकिन बीच में जैसे आप किसी को फ्रेंड बनाते हैं, उनके जरिए आपके पास कुछ आप नहीं करेंगे, लेकिन उसका तरीका है कि आप उसको लॉक कर दो, लेकिन आप कितने फ्रेंड को लॉक करोगे? फाइनली उनके कुछ ऐसे वीडियोज आने लगे जिसको उन्होंने कहा ये तो किसी ने हैक कर लिया है, तो मजबूरन मुझे ब्लॉक करना पड़ा, हटाना पड़ा, फेसबुक अकाउंट से मुझे हटना पड़ा।
Okay, so as of now you don't have a Facebook account. Shivam, you have a Facebook account, even I do. But I spend much less time than possibly you do on the internet rather. I have not come across any objectionable content.
You're defaming me constantly, Charu, about my internet usage.
No, I'm not defaming. No, Shivam, I'm not defaming. I'm just trying to establish that you are more closely related to the internet than I am. But I too spend a lot of time on the internet. On Facebook, till now, I have a very old account. Till now, I have not come across any objectionable content. If I would, in fact, I have to start looking for it now that objectionable content has become such a big headline.
Exactly.
What is your take on it? How much of this objectionable content is available, it is visible to people, and how much of a threat is there that this content could incite communal passions in the country?
Right. See, there is objectionable is a subjective term, but there is all kinds of stuff on the internet. There is nothing probably that you cannot find on the internet. The internet can also tell you how to make a bomb, right? However, the nature of the internet is such that you can choose not to see something that is objectionable. For instance, on Lok Sabha TV, there is something objectionable. The viewer does not have a choice. He has to either change the channel, but if you have to see Lok Sabha TV, he has to see those objectionable things. On the internet, however, you do not get things on your own. You go looking for them. So if, like Mr. Rai, I go looking for objectionable stuff that will hurt my sentiments, I'll find it. A lot of stuff, you know, and I have come across stuff that I find on the internet that hurts my sentiments. I ignore it. You know, it's human nature. You can ignore it. And to date in India, no violence has been caused because of anything on the internet. Yes, it may happen. However, that does not mean that you have to start regulating the internet as a whole when it has not even caused any problems as yet, right? He gives the examples of 2611 and Ayodhya title suit when TV channels had this issue of how much to show, what to show, how to show. In both those cases, violence was being prevented. In the 2611 case, it is believed that TV channels were actually helpful to the terrorists. In the Ayodhya case, the government was doing, and the NBA was doing this to prevent violence that they thought might happen. In this case, when you go looking for offensive material, which is not even causing violence, I think we are just jumping the gun and creating a problem where there is none. But all of this points to a larger thing about freedom of expression in India, where over the last many decades, be it Hindus or Muslims or even the so-called secular sort of people, they have created a kind of environment where it is considered an accepted norm that religious sentiments cannot be hurt. If one goes by Voltaire's quotation that you read out, I would like to defend the right to hurt religious sentiments as well. The hurting religious sentiments is not the same as terrorists killing people in Bombay. It does not take one's life, you know. Seshadri Chari spoke about freedom of expression not being an absolute right. There are restrictions, but should there be a restriction on hurting religious sentiment? Because that is one thing that is so easily misused. It is misused to actually inflame passions. There is in the case of M.F. Hussain and Salman Rushdie both, I think neither of them intended to hurt anybody's sentiment. Now, if all kinds of people come and say that my sentiment is hurt, and they are saying this to exploit communal passions for their own politics, then what we are seeing here is, in the name of freedom of speech, the debate is actually one of politics. And we have had this environment in India over the past few decades. It has grown since the emergency, and since the emergency was talked about, let me say that what Mr. Rai is talking about, so-called self-regulation by companies, is actually euphemism for saying that the companies should do censorship for the government, on the government's behalf. This is very much like the emergency, where the government wanted to see what content is going and shut down newspapers. Similarly, a website called cartoonsagainstcorruption.com has been shut down by the Bombay police under the new draconian IT rules. So what we are seeing once again here is, you know, both Mr. Sibal and Mr. Rai very fortuitously had the very similar view on the issue of religious hate speech on the internet. But in the name of that, what it is actually about is censoring political content. And we already have a case where a 24-year-old cartoonist from Kanpur, the website cartoonsagainstcorruption.com, has been removed. Now, why is that less outrageous than the shutting down of the magazine that Mr. Chari was associated with?
Right. Mr. Chari, about the issue of banning a book, in India, at the time when this book was banned, our literacy rate was barely around 50%. We have come a long way since that, but still there are a very large number of illiterates in India. They cannot read that book. About the question of banning paintings, damaging paintings, much lesser number of people who can read books can actually appreciate paintings. They would not go to art galleries to watch any painting. Painting can come and go, painters can come and go. About banning internet sites, about banning social networking sites, banning internet, censoring internet. Internet is available to hardly 7%, 8% of the Indian population. On all these issues where freedom of speech and expression, or according to some people, a violation of the freedom of speech and expression he seems to be coming on all these fronts. They seem to be, these issues don't seem to have the potential to cause that kind of a situation which they are accused of. What is your take on that?
You know, many times what happens is we are looking at issues from a very subjective point of view. So things can go wrong. We can be totally off the mark if you look at it from a subjective point of view rather than from the objective point of view. All these mediums which have developed over the last, say, a decade or so, not more than that. Nobody, his generation 10, 15 years back did not hear of Facebook. It didn't exist. I mean, Google was not very well known. Today, even a class teacher in a school tells the children to go to Wikipedia and find out something about XYZ and then prepare a homework.
Right.
So these things have become part and parcel of our life. So they have an education value, they have a knowledge imparting value, they have their own advantages. So to that extent of having the advantages, it's very good. But at the same time, if a particular medium is being misused, or if a particular medium has the potential of vitiating an atmosphere, a government and the agencies have all a role to play. Therefore, it is very difficult to say whether a particular channel has to be. For example, he mentioned about the cartoon.com or corruption.com or whatever it is. Fine. I think if one particular .com or someone brings up with these things, it's okay. It has been there, but you cannot have a mechanism.
I understand what you're saying. I understand what you're saying. Allow me to get back to your previous statement also. I mean, you're saying that these there are issues which have the potential to cause disturbance. Okay, and you told me in the previous segment that whether a certain issue has this potential or not is decided by the collective wisdom of the civil society. While Professor Ray would beg to disagree with you, he said that there has to be an institutional mechanism, and in India, in the Indian Constitution, our judiciary has been entrusted the responsibility. How can something as vague as society, as civil society, which came in for a lot of criticism in the last year, how can that decide what can incite passion?
See, it's like saying that I get threatening calls from somebody on my mobile.
Yeah.
I can't go to the police and say that, look, my mobile operator should be banned. The mobile operator has only conveyed, it is my enmity with XYZ that has brought up this. So I have a recourse in the law, I have a recourse as far as this thing is concerned. I give my mobile number, the number through which I have received the call, the police takes action, and this and this and that. So many other things can be done.
Right.
So
but what about protesting against a certain painter and his painting?
Correct. See, there are certain issues which are prone to throw the society into a vulnerable situation, and every society has to emerge out of it. Some societies might have emerged beyond all these things, but a society like China, because that comes into our debate very often, they are not evolved. So, for example, the Chinese government is too protective about democratic rights of political parties. They don't allow any issues regarding Tibet to be discussed inside China. So they have their own system of firewalls. They have removed you cannot go to China and search for Tibet. The search engine will not provide you that option at all. So, I mean, this is censorship. This is going to that extent. And if we should not go to that extent, if the events should not force us to go to that extent, like this gentleman who has gone to court on this issue, if such a situation should not arise, I think the collective wisdom of the civil society and the collective wisdom of all the service providers also have to take the sensibilities of the society in which they are operating. So you cannot aim to be providing a service which, irrespective of what your sensibilities are, we are always right, because the Constitution guarantees that right. This is where I said every right has a corresponding duty.
You're still arguing the case for the collective wisdom of the society, of the civil society, and all the various groups which form a part of this terrible phrase, I think, civil society, which has come in for much criticism, if we remember various episodes in last year. It's time for us to slip into yet another break. When we come back, the discussion will continue. Stay tuned to Public Forum. Now, the government is very much an institutional mechanism with its various bodies, as compared to a vague organism like the civil society. What happens when government decides that, fine, this is a violation of the right to freedom of speech and articulation, and the government bans a certain book, government censors, decides about censoring probably certain websites, or it could happen, it could take place in other domains too. Now that is an institutional mechanism, but that gives rise to more debates. Why don't things quieten up then?
Well, I think here are questions where one has to be a little cautious about what one generalizes as theoretical principles and what one generalizes about its operative dimensions, and more so in a country like India. Now, obviously, if a censorship has to be imposed, it is the government which can do it. No one else can do it and ought to do it. Censorship imposed by any other group would be in fact capitulation of government of one of its principal functions. It's just not done. But the important question is, how legitimate is government's decision to do it? Is it doing it in the way in which the emergency, for example, to give the example, was imposed, in which the entire opposition or most of it were either jailed, the press was censored, and everything was justified in the name of we the people? This is one way. The government did it, of course, and that's why it had to be closed. But I think the important question is, government ought to do it if it is necessary, but government ought to do it only in case of the last resort. You know, any such banning, whether it is books of Salman Rushdie or paintings of Hussein, any such banning or censorship involves a very, very important decision which a government ought to be very careful and must carry with it, what Mr. Chari said, the collective wisdom of the civil society. In fact, to facilitate the continuous evolution in normative terms of the collective wisdom, which is not a constant factor, I think there has to be a range of freedom which must be restricted only in the rarest of rare cases.
Okay.
And
so
that rarest of rare cases,
government can step in since it is authorized to, but as a last resort. Yeah. We have a viewer on the phone line with us right now. We have Mr. Gautam from Patna. Gautam, welcome to Public Forum.
Yeah, first of all, hi, hello.
Yeah, please go on, Gautam.
Actually, the way Indian government prone to banning the social fight and the crucial means of freedom of expression, so don't you think this will, it's a kind of Taliban thing, and don't you think this will diminish the image of our political class in front of international community? And my second question would be, what is the difference between legislative restriction and regional restriction?
Okay, Gautam, thank you so much for your question. Professor Ray, would you like to take that up?
Yes, I think this is exactly the example that we were discussing, which ought not to be done. Government's action also involves the action of a particular political, idea, which I think in many cases are very suspect. And in the Indian context today, any government action is bound to be or appears to be partisan. So government, unless it is very clear that it is taking a decision which is clearly represents what Mr. Chari said, the collective wisdom of the civil society, I think it becomes extremely suspect. That is why I think one has to be very careful about using this sort of extreme measures, by which I mean censorship or banning books or banning photographs or banning internet, only in the rarest of rare cases where there is a clear proven case of a particular act or a particular view.
It should be
inflamed passion.
Most extreme and the rarest of rare cases.
It is proved to have inflamed passion.
Right. Professor, I have to take another caller. We have Mr. Bashir from Kolkata. Bashir, welcome to Public Forum. Mr. Bashir from Karnataka. Mr. Bashir?
Yes, sir. My name is Basir Abbas. I am working as a manager. I have a question. Few weeks back, there was an issue on the religious book of Hindus, Gita, and the whole nation, including Hindus and Muslims, and particularly media, sit together and sent a message that it should not be banned because this will send a wrong signal and it will hurt the religious sentiments of Hindus. Now there is an issue regarding Salman Rushdie and the Muslims that he should not be allowed to come to India because he has already hurt the religious sentiments of Muslims.
Right.
But most of the people, including media, did not support this. Why these double standards, and are we sending a wrong signal towards the Muslims of the India?
Okay, Mr. Bashir. Thank you so much for your question.
I want to answer that. Firstly, Gita was being banned in Russia, not in India. Satanic verses is not the Quran that you're comparing with the Gita. Basically that's one.
And the Russian episode was also a certain interpretation of translation of the Gita.
And ultimately the Russian courts did not ban it. But the important thing here is, you know, a very interesting caller, a very interesting question, that the Hindu right has been talking about the ban on satanic verses for since '89 to justify its own censorship on M.F. Hussain and other cases on the film Fire, etc. Whenever they want to censor something in the name of religious sentiments are hurt, they say, look, satanic verses was banned. And when it comes to Muslims, they say, oh well, look at Gita, look at M.F. Hussain, so now we'll have our censorship as well. So what we have are fundamentalists competing with each other on who can be more censorious and who can hurt freedom of speech more than the other. They're competing.
Okay.
Now, why don't these people just allow all kinds of freedom of expression to exist so that there is no competition of this kind, and what you don't like, what you find offensive, just don't read it. That's it.
Okay, so there's competing models of fundamentalism which are coming into play.
It's very easy. It's very easy to take a particular example and then classify the society into fundamentalists and non-fundamentalists. The issue here is not what one fundamentalist says or the other. Fundamentalism is something that no religion obviously allows, but there are certain religions which have certain notions, certain parameters above which they have not evolved. The Christianity has evolved over 1200 years, and now today a slur on, say, Jesus Christ is not taken as much as an insult to a Christian in the US or somewhere else. So they have evolved. It might take some more years. There were times when Hindu scriptures could not be interpreted, but over a period of 8,000, 10,000 years, most of the Hindu scriptures have been evolved. So there have been tikas, tippanis, what they call the bhashyams on number of Hindu scriptures.
I think
so this has evolved. Similarly, a time may come when the society will evolve to that extent. But it will be wrong to assume that this particular action has to have a immediate action of the government.
Professor Ray, isn't it the case that unless impeded by these forces, our society is very much moving in the direction of evolution? It is only when these forces impede this process that the evolution is interrupted for a short while.
The evolutionary process of religious discussions is a continuing process which goes on.
Yeah.
But what you are saying is the evolutionary process is impeded by the politics around the social evolution of religious ideas. That part is well taken. And what we are discussing, Mr. Chari, your main analogies, on which we can have another debate as to which religion provides for fundamentalism and which religion does not. I am not too sure that it is entirely, I would agree with you that Christianity also does not have its what is called fundamentalist. In fact, there was this film on Jesus which was in fact opposed.
Passion of the Christ.
That's right. So every religion has its group of fundamentalists, but I'm only saying that unless a particular act or a particular book is proved to have caused the sort of problem that I think we are talking about, I think any banning of that by whether government, of course it has to be done by the government if it has to be done, but would be a very it would be a suspect decision. And I think that ideally it should be left overwhelmingly to a free assertion of books and ideas to ensure the evolution of both religious freedom.
Vinay has been waiting for a very long time to say something. Vinay, you will have to, I'm sorry, you will have to wait for a little more while. I have to take this caller and then I will come back to you. It's time for us to slip into a very short break. We have Mr. Amitabh Rai from Kolkata joining us. Mr. Rai, if you're there with us, please go on with the question.
मैं क्वेश्चन कर रहा हूँ सर, हिंदी में कर रहा हूँ, बंगाली है, हिंदी में।
जी कहिए।
गीता को रशिया में सर, रशिया में जो गीता को बैन करता था, दुर्गा जी का बोला था, गीता को सर हिंदू मुस्लिम सबको उपदेश दिया है। हम तो सर टीवी में देख करके हमको गीता तो नहीं पढ़ा है, ये पता पड़ा है। गीता में ऐसा उपदेश दिया संसार का जो आलोचना का कोई विषय नहीं है, लेकिन रशिया में तो सर इसको बंद कर दिया। किस कारण से पार्लियामेंट में तो बहुत हंगामा हुआ था, वो लालू प्रसाद
आपकी बात, लेकिन हालांकि आपकी जानकारी के लिए मैं बता दूं, आखिरकार गीता पर बैन नहीं हुआ रशिया में, वहां के कोर्ट ने उस पर बैन के खिलाफ ही अपना जो जजमेंट दिया था। वेलकम टू पब्लिक फोरम।
Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Good evening to everyone. So my question is that we are the internet users can be divided into many categories, right, from immature to experts. And we are available with various types of filters on the internet, so we can easily block content at least for 60% of the internet users, at least in India. And one more thing, that right to speech has an option. For right to speech is liable for reasonable restrictions, including public order also. So why don't we apply certain filters to block content for maximum of the public, maximum of the users?
Yeah.
To avoid obscene contents,
Okay.
to see them. And
Okay.
one more, that to judge the reasonable restriction, why aren't there is a independent authority like election commission that will decide, because internet is both opportunity and a challenge.
Okay, Ashish, thank you so much for all your views and all your questions. Vinay, internet penetration in India is only about 7 to 8% till now. That is the percentage to which internet reaches out. Even among that percentage, people like me, people like Shivam, who go to the internet regularly, we are in a very, very small minority. Thirdly, as Shivam pointed out, in internet, what happens on TV is that you are shown something, you do not have the choice to not watch it. You have the only choice available to you is to change the channel or to switch off the television. On internet, you go seeking the content. You actually log into a particular website to see what you want to do. In all these, still you feel that the content that you are talking about, it has a potential to incite communal passions on such a large scale.
देखिए चाहे उस पर मैं कहना चाहूँगा कि जो हम देखना चाहते हैं हम देखना चाहते हैं। आप एक टीवी अगर रिमोट आप बदल दीजिए, आगे बढ़ जाइए। लेकिन इसका एग्जांपल मैं इसी पार्लियामेंट से देना चाहूँगा। किसी पार्लियामेंट के अंदर एक मेंबर ऑफ पार्लियामेंट ने पूर्व प्रधानमंत्री अटल बिहारी वाजपेयी के बारे में असंसदीय भाषा का इस्तेमाल किया। उसको स्पीकर ने कार्रवाई से डिलीट कराया। अब कहा से डिलीट कराने की जरूरत क्या है? जो कोई ढूंढेगा बेनी प्रसाद वर्मा ने क्या कहा था अटल बिहारी वाजपेयी के बारे में, पढ़ लेगा। जरूरत क्या डिलीट कराने की, रहने दीजिए उसमें। सेकंड, उस पर अपोलॉजी दिया पीएम ने, क्योंकि ये माना जाता है कि कोई चीज असंसदीय है, किसी के बारे में गलत कही जा रही है, किसी की भावनाओं को ठेस पहुंचा रही है, तो रिकॉर्ड में नहीं होना चाहिए। एक सिंपल उदाहरण और सबसे बड़ी चीज है कि ये मैकेनिज्म खुद पार्लियामेंट ने डेवलप किया है। अगर किसी की भावना आयत होती है, हमारे तुरंत रिकॉर्ड पे बात बोली जाती है तो स्पीकर से डिलीट करा देती है। ये चीजें खुद कंपनियां क्यों अपने ऊपर लागू करती हैं? अगर आप एक नहीं करेंगे तो किसी को मौका देंगे खुद कुछ करने के लिए। अगर आप जैसे इलेक्ट्रॉनिक मीडिया ने कहा कि हम खुद अपने अंदर मैकेनिज्म डेवलप कर रहे हैं, गवर्नमेंट थोड़ी पीछे हटी। अगर आप यही चीज अपने अंदर डेवलप कर लें तो जरूरत ही नहीं गवर्नमेंट को आने की। लेकिन अगर आप कहेंगे कि नहीं हम तो यूएस लॉ से गवर्न होते हैं, हम तो इंडिया कानून का नहीं मानते हैं, तो कोई ना कोई बीच में फिर आना पड़ेगा। और इस समय सब कुछ कोर्ट के सामने है। कोर्ट खुद तय करेगी कि लार्जर स्केल में क्या होना चाहिए, क्योंकि आज हो सकता है कि कोई ऐसा कंटेंट आए कि बीजेपी को बुरा लग जाए, कोई ऐसा कंटेंट आए कांग्रेस को बुरा लग जाए। लेकिन कोर्ट इस परिपेक्ष से बाहर निकल के देख रही है कि किसी की भावना, किसी कम्युनिटी की भावना आहत न हो, वो एक शायद वो फाइनल सोल्यूशन हो सकता है।
Okay, Vinay, thank you. Naresh Panchal is joining us from Gujarat right now. Mr. Naresh, welcome to Public Forum.
Paresh Panchal. Hello?
Yes, please go on. We can hear you.
Yes. फ्रीडम ऑफ स्पीच के बारे में मैं इतना कहना चाहूंगा। हेलो
जी पांचाल साहब, आप अपने टेलीविजन सेट का वॉल्यूम पहले बहुत कम कर दें, बंद कर दें, उसके बाद फिर सवाल पूछें अपना।
जी मिल रही है कंप्लीट।
जी कहिए।
भारत में फ्रीडम ऑफ सभा। हेलो हेलो।
Okay, there seems to be some problem with the audio link there. I would request our viewers to first turn off the volumes of their TV sets and then ask the question when you are on air. Shivam, what is your defense to what Vinay had to say?
Well, I think you cannot compare the parliament with the internet. In the case of the parliament, parliamentarians have made this law for themselves that what is unparliamentary language, what is parliamentary language. They actually publish a whole book of unparliamentary words that cannot be used there. The internet, however, you have to understand the medium, you have to understand the fact that it is not controllable. Even in China, people who want to search for Tiananmen Square or Tibet are actually able to circumvent even the Chinese firewall to find what they want to find about those things. So in the case of the internet, to try and regulate it with Indian law as though it was here, it is not here. The internet is very US owned, it's international, it's designed in a certain way that it cannot be controlled. To control the internet is an oxymoron. You know, the internet, for instance, India has blocked some 60-70 websites. However, you can simply go to a proxy site and access those websites even now. So, you know, one defense I have is just the nature of the internet is such. All you can do, like China, is you can force Google to leave India and cause international embarrassment. However, Google and all the content will still be accessible to us.
You're saying so this line of thought essentially comes from a lack of understanding of the way the internet works and with the way social media works. Professor Ray, on the issue of censorship in literature, to begin with, the Jaipur Literary Fest has kicked off. Salman Rushdie the final word on Salman Rushdie is that he is not coming. His statement was read out by the organizers, and he says that his sources have told, Intelligence Bureau sources have told him that there is a threat to his life if he attends there. Is that a misfortune for literary lovers, merely for literary lovers, or is that a setback for all our ideals of democracy too?
No, I don't know enough of whether it is a setback for literary lovers. From report that I get, of course it is one, but more important than that, I think it is a unfortunate incident in India's democratic credibility. In fact, he is perfectly legitimate resident of England. He is a non-resident Indian also. And England, where he was given the fatwa for his life, provides extra security, spends the money to ensure that British democracy, which is a source of inspiration for the rest of the world, is that doesn't get tarnished. It is not to say that they necessarily approve of Salman Rushdie's, literary criticism of Prophet Muhammad, whether he is blasphemy or otherwise, but his right to life is protected by the government, and that ought to have been, of course, in fairness to the government has said that they would do it. Some reports seem to have suggested that there was a threat to life, and he has himself decided not to come. It is an unfortunate event in Indian democracy. Even I am also of the opinion that I am not too sure whether the book should have been banned. I think this whole question of banning books or not allowing people whose views we disagree with, whether it is Taslima Nasreen. I have seen the way poor lady was treated in the Hyderabad Press Club, and I feel those are the people, including some MPs, who are today among the champions to say that Salman Rushdie has crossed blasphemy and hence shouldn't come.
Professor,
most of them have read the book of Satanic Verse.
It's almost time for me to wind up, just a couple of minutes left. So Mr. Chari, I would like to come to you now. Do you also feel that this development finally is an unfortunate one for Indian democracy?
In between these events, there is a report that Salman Rushdie had come to India almost 5 times.
Yes, right.
In these 5 times, nobody spoke anything about him. There could have been some objections probably. I'm sure somebody would have raised objections. But he came, he spoke.
You're saying that this issue was rigged up in a big way this time because elections are around the corner?
This time, I think there were certain interest groups which for them this was an opportune moment to raise this issue.
Do you feel more often that at the end of the day this is unfortunate?
Absolutely, it's very unfortunate.
Okay.
In fact,
then I would also like to know your take on one development which happened last year. One of the foremost painters in India's history, M.F. Hussain, he died in exile.
I'll come to M.F. Hussain also.
Is that an unfortunate development too?
Unlike Salman Rushdie's case, the M.F. Hussain case, although there were a lot of objections to his paintings and other things, there was a court case going on. And there were appeals to M.F. Hussain saying that all that you have to do is come out with an appeal saying that you did this, and you give your part of the explanation. He refused.
He was being forced to apologize.
He said no, I will not apologize. Then fine. What the action that he took? He went out of this country on his own choice. And the government of India told him that if you choose to come back, we will give you enough protection. But he said, I don't have faith in the government of India's words. It's very unfortunate. It's very unfortunate.
The Supreme Court commented on the legal harassment against MF Hussain, where cases were being filed all over the country against him,
but again,
to make sure that if he comes back, he has to keep running from one court to another. This 98-year-old man.
Very
is the Supreme Court dropped all those cases and combined them into one case.
I mean,
the danger.
So these are facts. So these are facts which are available to us. But I am talking about the larger trends which are taking place in the society. And how one group seems to be claiming to be holier than thou as far as freedom of speech and expression is concerned, and both these groups essentially competing. So it is our politics which seems to be forcing us on stopping this process of revolution.
The civil society has to emerge.
Right. This is the way the society has to emerge.
The collective wisdom of the civil society.
Right.
Like in the case of MF Hussain, where there were Hindu groups which got up and said, no, this is wrong.
Okay.
I would be very happy if some Muslim group comes up and says, no, let Salman Rushdie come and say whatever he wants.
Okay.
We will have a discussion.
Okay, I'm afraid, gentlemen, I seem to have run out of Professor A. I'm so sorry. Professor A, I'm extremely sorry, all of you gentlemen. I seem to have run out of time. That's all we have time for. The jury is still out on this. This debate can go on, and we certainly hope that the debate goes on. It's only debate which should go on. We certainly hope so. But Seshadri Chari, Professor Ray, Vinay Rai, Shivam Bij, thank you so much for your time.